What's going on, everyone out there on the internet? Chris Oram here, host of Elevation with Chris Oram. Today, I'm going to be sharing with you 15 learning lessons that you should know and be aware of before you start your own podcast. I say this after hosting over 15 episodes of my own show, Elevation with Chris Oram. I wish I knew these things when I started my podcast, and I want you to know them as well. So let's get started. Let's start off with lesson number 1. Just start, don't think about it. The more time you spend thinking about starting the show is the longer you'll put that off into the future. The more opportunity that you have to not start the show, and the more excuses and reasons you give yourself to not start. My suggestion is just start with the first episode. Find a guest, find if you're going to do it solo, and just put it out to the world. Your first episode isn't going to be your best episode, but it does pave the way for more episodes to come and to continue to get better and better on your craft. And that goes along with lesson number 2. You'll get better through on-the-job training or on-the-podcast training. Through the process of doing your own podcast, you'll learn tips, tricks along the way that you would have otherwise never learned. Because you're putting in the work, you're doing the reps, and you're learning the skills that come along with podcasting. It's all about putting the time in and learning through on-the-job training. So that's why I recommend just starting. And then once you do start, you can learn through the art and through the craft of podcasting. This is a big one, and that's number 3. Find your who. For me, I knew I wasn't the most technical when it comes to producing podcasts. I didn't have the technology. I didn't have the audio engineering background. I didn't even know how to get a podcast on the platform. So Bedros Keuilian says, find your who. I found my who in Sticky Paws Studios. So I invested into filming at a podcast studio so I could find the experts in the area and they could help me achieve the podcast that I wanted to. By finding the exact people that could help me produce my podcast, I learned so much through them because they were the experts and I relied on them and their expertise to walk me through exactly what needs to be done. I time-collapsed the process of becoming a better podcaster by surrounding myself with the who and the experts in the podcast industry. And I recommend that you do the same. My next piece of advice is find a solid first guest. I had my dad as a first guest and it absolutely started the momentum for a great show. We had a very interesting talk and it really just paved the way and built the confidence up for growing the show and continue to produce more and more episodes. Tip number 5, you should watch back your own show. You'll learn so much about yourself and how you present yourself and the questions that you ask and how you can overall be a better podcaster. Athletes do this when they watch their film back. They see what they did right and they see what they did wrong so they can improve for future games or future episodes of the podcast. You really need to spend the time to review, and I know it is an extra hour after you've already put in the time commitment to record the episode, but it's well worth it. It'll help you know yourself better so that you can improve. Number 6, the owner of Sticky Paws Studio taught me this one, but podcasting is a high status network activity. Rather than going to coffee and picking someone's brain, you can invite them to come on your podcast. You bring them into the studio, make them feel right at home, and you can pick their brain and really bring their leverage in so you can not only learn for yourself, but this is a recorded episode that you're able to share with the world. And that's a high status networking activity. You get to meet cool people, you get to interact with them, and you bring them into your circle. I can't tell you how many great relationships I've made through my 15 podcast guests already, and I can't wait to expand my network even more. Number 7 is choose a general topic. I know this one might have a little bit of controversy, but let me explain from my own example. I host Elevation with Chris Oram. This is the show where we talk to individuals who have climbed the ladder of success. What I originally had a podcast for is Smart Home Talk with Chris Oram. How many episodes could I truly do, and how many people would actually care about Smart Home Talk with Chris Oram? I can guarantee you that more people care about my personal brand as Chris Oram, and they can relate to a story of elevating, because then we're able to talk to interesting characters from all different niches. The smart home niche, the marijuana niche, the strip club niche, the businessman niche, the casino niche. I really bring in the entire culture of Las Vegas, and I'm able to talk to lots of different people and lots of interesting people across different industries as a whole. So that's why I recommend go general. You may disagree, but feel free to. I can only recommend what I'm doing. Next, consider the time commitment. There's going to be a large time commitment. It's going to be at least 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 hours per week. You have to find the guests, secure the guests, confirm the studio space, confirm with the guests, record the show, watch back the show, publish it to YouTube, pick your clips, upload the clips to social media, promote, and all sorts of different things. There's a large time commitment to podcasting, and you need to think about it more than just a week or a month at a time. If you're thinking about doing this for a long-term time period, you need to be thinking in terms of years. How long and how many hours is this gonna take? You really need to consider it because there is a large time commitment, and I want you to be aware of that. Number 9 might be slightly disappointing, but here's the truth. And I don't wanna put my results onto you, but your podcast may not grow as fast as you'd like. I had solid viewership throughout my entire podcast, but it didn't grow as much as I'd like. I didn't have random people just hitting me up out of the blue saying, hey, I love your show. We did have people coming in and finding the show through all different sorts of places, whether that be through the guests or just finding it on YouTube or the podcast platform. However, it wasn't an overnight success. I wasn't Joe Rogan overnight, and maybe I thought that that was going to happen, and unfortunately it didn't. However, I'm growing through the process and I'm enjoying the journey, and that's what matters to me. And I want you to be aware of that because you're not going to have a sponsor right out of the gate. And I don't want that to be disappointing for you because it has been disappointing for me in some regard. I wish my podcast would have performed better. But that's what I'll bring into the next reason of how you can be successful in your podcast. My next tip is going to be promote, promote, promote. You need to promote on every single social media platform. You need to be telling all your friends about it. This is how you're gonna grow the show. If you don't tell anyone about it, it's probably just gonna sit on the podcast app and it's really not gonna be a success. You are the solo person in charge of promoting your podcast, and you just gotta do it to the absolute best of your ability. Next is gonna be a benefit for recording at the studio. You wanna make your guests feel like they are the most important person in the world. And when you have a staff of people helping you produce the show, not only are they being welcomed, they get to walk into the awesome studio space. They get to ask if they need anything, a water, snacks, things like that. We just want to make them feel at home because that show, that hour, that opportunity is all about the guests. You want to make sure that you feel that they are so appreciated to be there and that they say, wow, I really enjoyed being a guest on Chris Orum's show. Here's one that I learned just through the trial and error process, and that's you should always be at least one episode ahead. Batching podcasts, although some people may want to record weekly, if you batch them ahead of time, you'll always be prepared. If something comes up, like a guest canceling, you get sick, you don't want to record that weekend, whatever happens, you always have episodes to be released so you never fall behind. I do recommend a weekly frequency. However, that is a big time commitment, so obviously consider the results of that. Let's talk about preparation for our next tip. You want to be prepared ahead of time. You want to think of good questions. You want to think of relevant questions. You want to think of thought-provoking questions. You want to think of questions that even might get a little controversial. You don't want to put your guests in a bad position, but you also want the podcast to be entertaining. If you just wing it, some people can be tremendously successful with that and they can provide a great result. But I do ask that you consider some questions ahead of time. What should I ask? What topics should I talk about? That way you can generally guide the conversation. I don't want you to be robotic, and I'm not robotic in that way, but I definitely do consider 5 to 10 good questions ahead of time, things that we want to talk about on the show. That way, you don't draw a blank and then it's the worst podcast you've ever recorded. Number 14, this goes back to our guests. I've reached out to guests and invited them on the show just to get no response. That sucks. I've reached out to guests and they've told me no. Not a great feeling. I've even had guests confirm for a show that at last minute cancel on the show. That is not a cool thing to do, so you shouldn't do that to someone else, but it's gonna happen, and that's just part of the process. If you get discouraged by someone canceling, saying no, or not responding to your invitation, remember those individuals. I know those individuals, they know who they are, but I'm not gonna hold a grudge. I'm gonna keep moving it forward, and there are people that do support the show. Those are the people and the area that I'm gonna focus on. Focus on the positive, not the negative, and I encourage you to not get discouraged. Tip number 15, and this is easier said than done, but you should enjoy the process. Every podcast you make is a piece of art. It's a conversation where you can learn and then you share that to the world as an opportunity. Being a podcaster is a tremendous gift. It's a tremendous opportunity, and it really is a high status leverage networking activity where you can not only grow your personal brand, but you can grow relationships and grow those brands. I love all of my podcast guests. I think I produce excellent quality shows in an excellent studio with excellent conversations. I have nothing but positive things to say about podcasting, and I'm really glad that I'd made the commitment and I tried it. I didn't just think about starting a podcast because that's where I was for years. I thought about starting a podcast, but really I just went all in. I didn't think about it. I just went at it and I learned along the way, and that's where I got these learning lessons. And that's why I want to share them with you, because these are my personal learning lessons. These are things that helped me. These are things that I've taught myself and that I've learned through the process. It's so important to reflect on these things and share them with you, because if I can do anything and provide you value and help you be more successful in your podcast, that would make me feel great. Podcasting is super cool. It's only going to continue to grow. And if you're thinking about starting a podcast, I can only encourage you to do it. If you're thinking about it and you need some extra encouragement, drop me a line. If you need to find your who in Las Vegas, reach out to Travis at Sticky Paw Studios. I'll drop their link down below. I love Sticky Paw Studios. I love podcasting. I love Elevation with Chris Oram, the concept of talking to individuals who have climbed the ladder of success. And although I'm wrapping up season 1 after 15 episodes, that doesn't mean that future seasons are not to come. I'm really excited about the future endeavors of the podcast, and I encourage you, if you want to check out more podcast episodes, go down below. This is Elevation with Chris Oram, but this is my smart home YouTube channel where we're posting new videos here every single week, and I really hope you guys got some value out of today's video. It's slightly more off topic, but the podcast is what I've been focusing on for the last few months, and I really wanted to share this information with you here today. I hope you guys got some value out of today's video. I really appreciate you watching to the end here, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.